Hello, Namaskara. Welcome back to the NEET zoology session. We shall be continuing today with the respiratory system. The previous session we have stopped at this fetal hemoglobin after we understood regarding the oxygen dissociation curve with respect to adult and fetal hemoglobin. So the main idea was to understand how or what is the capacity of hemoglobin to attach oxygen to it. Okay, so an adult hemoglobin has capacity of attaching 4 molecules of oxygen to it. This happens gradually. All right, as in how the partial pressure of oxygen increases, the saturation of hemoglobin or the capacity to fill hemoglobin with oxygen is going to increase. All right, yeah. So going ahead, we shall study about what is it with respect to myoglobin. Understand a fact about myoglobin. Myoglobin is the pigment specifically present in the muscle cells. Like hemoglobin has capacity to attach 4 oxygen molecules, myoglobin has the capacity to attach just 1 oxygen molecule. That is the reason that the muscle cells easily get tired. Okay, just understand what is the link here. Okay, when your muscular activity is happening, just continuously try to move your fingers up and down like this. Try to, like you're kind of crushing a ball, smiley ball. Continuously do that. More than 2 minutes you cannot, because your fingers are going to get tired. Let's take a simple example. When you're writing continuously in exam, after certain, you take a small break, where you just relax your fingers. Okay, this is because every myoglobin molecule has got capacity to accommodate 1 oxygen. When it has 1 oxygen molecule associated with it, this oxygen will be utilized, okay, to generate energy. So if there are 10 molecules of myoglobin, each of them has only 10 molecules of oxygen, these 10 will quickly be used up. But in comparison to hemoglobin, if there were 10 hemoglobin, there would be 40 myoglobin oxygen molecules. So myoglobin has capacity for only 1 oxygen atom. All right, so what happens is, there is the tendency of getting tired of a muscle cell is quite higher when compared to any other internal structure. Because see, just compare internally, there are so many involuntary activities happening which need energy, which will use oxygen, right? But are they going to stop or get tired at any point? No, because hemoglobin is quite more efficient in providing or kind of catering oxygen to all of these internal organs. But when it comes to voluntary muscles or voluntary structures, this is what it is. Okay, let's just see what it has to say. Myoglobin is an oxygen binding molecule that is found in skeletal muscle tissue, like I mentioned. Okay, it is made up of single polypeptide with only 1 heme group and hence not capable of cooperative binding, okay, or binding more than 1 oxygen molecule. Consequently, the oxygen dissociation curve of myoglobin is not sigmoidal, it is logarithmic. Okay, hemoglobin has a higher affinity for oxygen than myoglobin has higher affinity for oxygen than adult hemoglobin and becomes saturated at lower oxygen levels. Even if little oxygen level, it is saturated because only one place. It is like bicycle with only one seat. Even if there are 10 people standing, if one person climbs that cycle rickshaw, then that's full, it is saturated. Unlike it is a cab where still unless and until other 3 people fill the seats, the vehicle will not move. Alright, so it's like that. So it has higher affinity to get saturated at lower levels of oxygen, that is the least one. Okay, myoglobin will hold on to its oxygen supply until levels in the muscle cells are very low. Okay, so during dense physical activity, till that point of time, myoglobin will be holding to its oxygen. Only when too much of work is being given to muscles, then it has to be generous and provide the oxygen that it has, so that the energy is produced and the physical activity is kept going on. Okay, and try to understand the phenomenon that is happening. The delayed release of oxygen helps to slow the onset of anaerobic respiration and lactic acid formation during exercise. Okay, because there is delay in sending oxygen, what happens is anaerobic respiration, anyways physical activity is happening, some way or the other energy has to be produced. Now when there is no oxygen, here anaerobic respiration takes place, releasing or resulting in the formation of lactic acid. This lactic acid makes the muscle cell undergo fatigue. Too much of lactic acid accumulation will reduce the physical efficiency and physical activity, and as a result it will slow down physical activity, or you get tired. Simple as it. Okay, so the dissociation curve of hemoglobin is this. It is low, okay, at zero partial pressure, zero saturation. Little partial pressure or even 1, it quickly shoots up and gets saturated. Okay, so this is a sigmoid one, which wherein gradually it fills and it goes. So this one is quite sharp, okay, with respect to myoglobin. Yeah. Now pH of blood. Is there going to be any change in pH of blood? Normal pH of blood is around 7. Okay, so 7.3 to 7.4. Let's try to understand what is this concept all about. pH of blood is regulated to stay within the narrow range of 7.3 to 7.4, 7.35 to 7.45. This is what it is supposed to be. If you remember, I just mentioned a point in the previous session that it's about chloride shift. Okay, I told you that in case there is no replacement of the hydrogen carbonate which moves out, okay, only H plus ion is left behind. If those H plus ions go on getting accumulated, then the pH of the RBC will be acidic, and that cannot happen because the range of blood pH should always be in this, so that all the other physiological processes that are dependent on blood are not hampered. Okay, so there is a concept called as acidosis, wherein the pH decreases below 7.3, and alkalosis where pH becomes more than 7.4. Okay, now how is it regulated? Fast response in minutes. Circulatory system, how does it regulate? Circulatory system uses the presence of buffers. Okay, in case there is reduction in the pH also, there are buffers, that is, for example, hemoglobin and hydrogen carbonate or carbonic acid, to prevent drastic change in the pH. Respiratory system helps balance pH by causing a faster breathing rate when a low pH is detected. Now whenever there is low pH, suddenly the respiration rate increases. Now why is the pH reduced? Again, because of acidosis due to more presence of CO2. Increased CO2, okay, results in acidosis, okay, which will gradually be allowing excess of CO2 to be exhaled. More CO2 accumulation in the body, that has to be exhaled out, because if it is present in the blood, it is going to result in reducing the pH. So more breathing will allow more oxygen to enter, and as a result this oxygen will replace CO2 and somehow bring about the balance. This is what respiratory system contributes. This is what circulatory system contributes. Let us see slow response in days. How does excretory system contribute in maintaining the pH of the blood? So excretory system assists with pH control by excreting H plus and absorbing Na when pH is low, and excreting sodium and reabsorbing hydrogen when the pH is high. So it's the H plus which is going to determine the pH. More H plus, acidic condition. Less H plus, basic condition. So that has to be somehow balanced. Okay, so how these three processes help in the maintaining the homeostasis. Homeostasis is a normal healthy condition of the body, okay, where all the parameters like blood pressure or ion level, all of it are in the pH, and all those are in balance. Next one, consequences of high altitude. Now this is applicative questions, which is very important. Now there is a question when they say, when you move to higher altitudes, like you're climbing a mountain, you're going on a trek. Okay, what happens is, as and how you're climbing, there are chances that it's going to be difference in your oxygen level, because as much as oxygen that is present around the ground, normal sea level, it is not there as much as that in the as and how the altitude increases. There is drop in the atmospheric oxygen. So while breathing itself, your oxygen level is low. How is that going to get compensated by the body? Okay, let's see what happens. So partial pressure of oxygen from ambient air through the venous blood. Resting levels at sea levels is at sea level, normal ground, at higher altitude. Okay, so ambient air, moist inspired air, alveolar air, arterial blood, venous blood. So what happens is, partial pressure of oxygen is the pressure of oxygen is high at sea level, that is at normal grounds. Pressure of oxygen is really low at higher altitudes. So what is going to happen? Gradually there is a reduction in the, you can see that the graph is getting down, right? So the venous blood also has got reduced oxygen levels. Now conclusions from the graph: decrease in partial pressure of oxygen when going from sea level to higher altitude. Okay, there is no pressure of oxygen because oxygen itself in the atmosphere is less. Decrease in partial pressure of oxygen from ambient air to venous blood at both sea and, so in either ways, when the blood is going to, when oxygen is going to move from ambient or atmospheric air up to the venous blood, there is reduction, but here there is drastic reduction because of the partial pressure also. Alright, yeah. What are the consequences of decreased alveolar partial pressure of oxygen on gaseous exchange at altitude? Okay, so we just saw how exactly the consequence of gas at higher altitude, how exactly it's going to happen. But now we will study with respect to the alveolar level. Okay, so decrease in partial pressure with increased altitude. So this is what happens. Okay, what happens is, first thing is less oxygen in each breath. So you do not, every time you take in air, less amount of oxygen will be reaching. Air is less dense, therefore each breath contains less oxygen. What happens? It makes it less efficient gas exchange. So as a result, low percentage of oxygen saturation of hemoglobin. So all the 4 seats are not full because the public itself is less. What has happened during corona? Right, there are no people to take cabs, right? Just an example. So when there are no people to take cabs, what will happen? The saturation of the cab will be reduced. So same happens here. When there is no oxygen in the atmosphere itself sufficient enough, so the hemoglobins are left less saturated. Okay, so what happens is, excuse me, acute mountain sickness is one thing that is suffered. Okay, so generally we see, people who go on trekking, all of them will not be healthy and hale. Some of them fall sick, fall ill. They need, some kind of medical treatment so that the oxygen levels are brought back to normal. So that is acute mountain sickness. High altitude pulmonary edema. Some people also, skin starts to dry. Okay, next, high altitude cerebral edema. Okay, sometimes it also reaches to the brain, because when oxygen is not reaching the brain, body is not going to function properly. So what happens ultimately? That might lead to death as well. Okay, so in case you're planning for any kind of mountaineering or climbing Mount Everest, please increase your lung capacity. Alright, yeah. Next thing is decrease in partial pressure with increased altitude. What is the second situation? There is less pressure to push oxygen into the blood. So partial pressure is primary force used to move oxygen into the blood and CO2 out by diffusion. So again, that's going to result in less efficient gas. Same thing, same track. Third situation is less room for oxygen into the lungs. Incoming air is saturated with water as it moves through the trachea, bronchi and into the lungs. So the partial pressure of water is constant as its volume in the lungs. Even this reduces the level of oxygen saturation and finally leading to all these conditions and might also as well lead to death. Alright? So rate of ventilation is controlled by the respiratory control center in the medulla oblongata. Now coming to the important part, okay, which tells us that respiration is not a voluntary or self-governed or self-run system. It is under the control of nervous system. So which part of the brain is going to take care of respiration? Okay, in case there is less oxygen or more carbon dioxide, either ways the information has to be the instruction has to come to the respiratory system from the brain, and it is the medulla oblongata which has taken the responsibility. Okay, what happens here? It is said to be the respiratory control center. What all does it do? Let's just have a look. It regulates the cycle of inspiration and expiration. It has the ability to continuously adjust ventilation, that is breathing rate, according to specific metabolic needs and requirements of the tissues. In case of, for example, if you're running, before running your breathing was normal. Once you finished your running, you can see that you're panting, panting in the sense you're in need of more oxygen. So this process, of telling the brain that breathe fast so that you can take more oxygen. Why do you need more oxygen? Because entire oxygen in your leg has just been utilized by running. So that has to be compensated. So if you breathe fast, then the oxygen from the atmosphere will get into your body. It will reach the legs and somehow compensate the loss of oxygen and bring back your legs to normal. Okay. Next, the medulla oblongata automatically controls the rate and depth of breathing. Ventilation rate mediated via feedback mechanism from the carotid and aortic bodies. Okay, the carotid bodies are in your neck region. Okay, aortic bodies are in your heart region. So they are also interconnected, like the assistants that help medulla oblongata regulate the rate of respiration. Okay, you can please just have a look at this explanation once again. I'll give you a few seconds. Yeah, moving ahead. Chemoreceptors are sensitive to changes in blood pH. Again, as I told you, if the pH of the blood drops, who will get to know this? Because if the pH drops, some or the other way has to be taken care to bring back the pH to normal. Okay, so what role does respiratory system play in this and how it plays? We shall just have a look here. Function of peripheral chemoreceptors. Chemoreceptors are chemical receptors. Okay, so here pH, acid and base, they are the chemicals that are telling the brain that the blood is not in its normal range, so please do something. Okay, so what does the brain do? It regulates the blood pH in response to H plus disturbance. Okay, we already have seen in chloride shift what happens. H plus ions increase, so that has to be brought to normal and it has to be balanced. Okay, it regulates the arterial partial pressure of carbon dioxide within normal limits in response to primary changes in CO2. Okay, so the carotid bodies and the aortic bodies are going to sense the chemoreceptors and bring about the above two changes, right? Now there is this concept called as Bohr's shift, which explains the increased release of oxygen by hemoglobin in respiring cells. Let's see what it is. Okay, so oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve, Bohr's shift. Here again the same graph, partial pressure of oxygen against the percentage of saturation. So why does the curve shift to right? This happens when the pH level decreases. pH level decreases in the sense it becomes acidic, which means that the H plus ions are on high. This happens during exercises. When exercise increases cellular metabolism and an increase in carbon dioxide and lactic acid. Okay, both of these means what? Increase in CO2 and lactic acid increases the H plus concentration, causing the decrease in pH level of the blood. Okay, yeah. Now, decrease in pH changes the hemoglobin structure, which decreases its affinity for oxygen. So what it does? Hemoglobin structure changes. It is not going to accommodate oxygen anymore. Therefore, at the same time, the partial pressure of oxygen is more. Okay, the same partial pressure, more oxygen releases by the hemoglobin. What happens? Now it is like bloodstream is going somewhere. Okay, carrying oxygen. Here actually oxygen was not necessary, but due to over exercise and all, more CO2 has been produced. So what happens? Somehow forcefully this oxygen is going to be released into it, so that there is a balance that is brought. Suppose the oxygen is supposed to go somewhere here, but because the oxygen requirement here is even more, there is forceful expulsion of oxygen into this cell, so that carbon dioxide is taken, and somehow there is balance in the balance of pH maintained. More oxygen available for respiring muscles, right? So this here what happens is there is shift of curve moves towards the right side. Coming to this chloride shift concept that I've already explained to you, but let's just have a quick look again. So CO2 from tissues comes into the RBC. Okay, so CO2 associates with water to form carbonic acid, okay, or hydrogen carbonate, hydrogen carbonate. This is an ionic form. This keeps moving out into the plasma membrane, hence to compensate, chloride shifts from plasma membrane into the RBC. Okay, when what this individual H plus does, it binds to the hemoglobin to form this structure. Alright, so acidic hemoglobin, acidic oxyhemoglobin. Okay, so acidic oxyhemoglobin, this associates with another oxygen to release oxygen out. Carbon dioxide in association with oxyhemoglobin will form carbaminohemoglobin, and this oxygen is moved out so that there is some balance brought. Alright, now let's see what it is. Chloride shift is also called as hamburger phenomenon. Remember this, in any question if they ask you what it is with respect to hamburger phenomenon, you need to know it is nothing but it is chloride shift. The greater proportion or 70% of carbon dioxide is transported in the form of bicarbonates. This point is very important. Bicarbonates in the sense HCO3 minus. Okay, here this one HCO3 minus. 70% of it is going to happen in this way. The CO2 reacted with the water of the cytoplasm in the presence of enzyme carbonic anhydrase to form carbonic acid. Okay. The carbonic acid H2CO3 is a weak acid which undergoes partial dissociation to yield hydrogen ion and bicarbonate ion. Okay, so this is what happens. So H2CO3 will split to form HCO3 minus plus H plus. Okay, this is what is a reaction. This is weak acid, so it quickly shifts to its split form in this way, and most of it, 70% of CO2 travels in this form. Okay, now the given reaction mostly occurs inside the RBCs because the enzyme carbonic anhydrase is present abundantly inside the RBC. That's the reason. In RBCs, carbon dioxide combines with water to form carbonic acid, which dissociates to give H plus ion. Yeah, I think that point has been repeated. No. ions in the presence of enzyme carbonic anhydrase. The bicarbonate ion then diffuses outside the RBC in the plasma and combines with sodium ions to form sodium bicarbonate. What happens here? The carbonic ion that is formed, HCO3, it goes out of the RBC, combines with sodium ions to form NaHCO3, sodium bicarbonate. Now loss of a bicarbonate, okay, the loss of this one, what happens is, because I told you that HCO3 keeps going out, that is because it has to combine with Na, okay, to form sodium bicarbonate. Loss of bicarbonate ions from RBC causes positive charge inside RBC, which is balanced by diffusion of chloride ion from plasma membrane into this. See, I told you this H plus becomes alone. So more and more H plus ions, pH will be at risk. So what happens? Cl comes to rescue. Okay, Cl minus comes inside to maintain balance. Now, this exchange of Cl ion and HCO3 minus between plasma and RBC is known as a chloride shift. Okay, this phenomenon of chloride shift maintains the electrical neutrality of the cell. This phenomenon is also called as a hamburger phenomenon. Reverse chloride shift occurs in the tissues. Okay, let's go ahead. Now coming to the next most important concept, that is the lung volumes, pulmonary capacities, pulmonary volumes. Just have a look here. Okay, before that, I would just like you to read these contents. I'll give you a minute. Okay, let's go ahead. Pulmonary lung capacities. Here we can see terms like inspiratory reserve volume called as the IRV. You can see tidal volume TV, residual volume RV, expiratory reserve volume, functional residual volume TLC, total lung capacity, inspiratory capacity, vital capacity. So what are these? Okay, we'll just study this. So starting from lung volume 0, 1000, 2000, 3000, 4000, 5000, or 1 liter, 2 liter, 3 liters, whatever. Now we can see there's a wave kind of thing here. Okay, so there is this tidal volume which follows a narrow range. Tidal volume is nothing but your normal breathing, what you're doing right now. Okay, this tidal volume is not going to fill your lungs completely. Whatever air is taken, okay, it's going to fill some alveoli here and there. Okay, and that air is going to expire. So it's barely half a liter of air that we keep respiring during every normal breathing. Now imagine you're doing pranayama, okay, wherein you're going to take in air deeply, okay, and leave out deeply. So it's that during that time where we see that the reserve volume which is there, that is getting filled. Okay, this is during inspiration, forceful inspiration, which is going to fill each and every other alveoli which has not been filled during normal respiration, that gets filled. Okay, so there are so many other things associated, these terms that are associated with it. We shall try to understand the definition of each one of it. Okay, so now let's just pulmonary air volume and capacities. In normal quiet breathing, there are about 15 complete respiratory cycles per minute. How much? In per minute, 15 complete cycles, that is inhalation and exhalation. Normal breathing, only 15. The amount of air exchanged during breathing is measured by an instrument called spirometer or respirometer. That's an important point. Now, the amount of air present in lungs under different conditions is known as pulmonary air volume, and capacities of lungs to hold air varies according to different conditions. Yeah. So some of the pulmonary air volumes are tidal volume. Okay, what does this tidal volume tell us? This is the amount of air passing into and out of the lungs during each cycle of breathing, which is about as normal as half a liter or 500 milliliters at normal rest. Next, respiratory reserve volume. Okay, this is the volume of air that can be inhaled into the lungs during normal inspiration. Okay, this is the normal volume of air that can be inhaled into the lungs. You're saying that can be, but we don't. Okay, so when you forcefully try to inhale, it is about 1000 ml, 1 liter more capacity it has other than the normal range. So total inspiratory reserve volume is 150 ml. So still there is space for one extra entire liter of air which we do not breathe normally. Expiratory reserve volume is this is the total volume of air which can be expelled from the lungs forcefully during normal respiration. Okay, so we are normally breathing in and out. Okay, so it's 1100 ml, that is 1.1 liter of air is in our body which can be thrown out after normal respiration, during normal respiration. This is what it is. Next one, inspiratory capacity. This is the amount of air that can be inspired with maximum effort. It consists of the tidal volume plus the inspiratory reserve volume. So this formula is given as IC is equal to TV plus IRV, which is about 2000 ml. Functional residual capacity, it is the amount of air remaining in the lungs after normal expiration. Remember, the lungs, the alveoli are never without, any air in it. There is going to be some air, and that is functional residual capacity which is left behind. The functional residual volume also prevents collapse of alveoli on expiration. So that is what happens. Some amount of air will definitely be there which is functional, where exchange of gas is taking place with this much amount of air in the alveoli. Residual volume, this is the volume of air remaining in the lungs after forceful expiration, which is about 1000 ml. So almost on an average 1 liter of air will be there in the lungs. Okay, even if you're forcefully breathing in or breathing out, whatever. Okay, vital capacity, this is the maximum volume of air which can be expired after or exhaled out after forceful inspiration in single breath. Okay, it's given by this formula. VC of athletes is more than normal person. Total lung capacity, it is a maximum amount of air that the lungs can hold after forceful inspiration. It is normally about 5 to 6 liters in adult. Dead space, the lungs in the air passages and the air passages are never empty, as I told you. Out of half liter of air inspired normally, 350 ml is exchanged across the walls and the alveolar ducts. About 150 of air always remains in the respiratory passage, which is called as the dead space. Please have a look at this diagram. Okay, I hope these lung volumes and capacities are clear to you. This is also an important part of the chapter. All right. So after understanding all the lung volumes and lung capacities, we will now come to the last part, that is the disorders of the respiratory system. Okay, most common disorders of the respiratory system are the ones that make the process of breathing difficult or the process of exchange of gases impossible. Okay, so what are these disorders? Anything that is going to obstruct the respiration, the breathing or exchange of gases are termed as the respiratory disorders. Okay, one such most important one is the emphysema. Okay, so how is this emphysema caused and what happens to it? The causes of emphysema can be the air pollution, which is the most common thing seen in metropolitan cities and almost in every city, because as and how the factories and vehicle uses are increasing, we cannot escape air pollution. Alright. Next are workplace fumes. Okay, there are people who are working in mines. There are people who work in industries where kind of different kinds of smokes are produced, which can be harmful. They may lead to emphysema and smoking. Okay, so these are the three major causes of emphysema. Let's see what exactly happens during emphysema. So alveolar sac becomes damaged. Okay, so this is a normal alveolar sac. You can see it is intact, but what happens in emphysema is these partitions, what are there, they damage entire alveoli becomes disoriented. All right, walls of the air sacs weaken and rupture. This creates larger air spaces instead of many small ones. Okay, reduced lung surface. As already discussed, we we were just looking at the consequences of emphysema. Okay, it is a condition where the alveoli of the individual who is exposed to the above mentioned condition undergoes. Alright, so what are the causes of emphysema? Let's just have a look again. Air pollution, smoking and fumes at the workplace. So these things, because we are going to respire air around, toxic substances are going to enter the lungs, and what effect that causes, we'll just have a look. The alveoli air sacs become damaged, walls of the air sacs weaken and rupture. Because alveoli are the most delicate structures, they are made up of single layer of epithelial squamous epithelial cells. Okay, you can imagine cell itself is a microscopic structure. Okay, so if that is in turn made up of something so delicate, then it is highly vulnerable to get damaged. Okay, so these cells, when attacked by harmful chemicals, there are chances that they will rupture. So when a single ball, just imagine a balloon just bursting off, of what good use is it? Nothing, right? Same happens with the alveoli. Once damaged or ruptured, it no longer helps in the process of gaseous exchange. Alright. Next is, this creates larger air spaces instead of small ones. Reduces lung surface area, so less amount of oxygen reaches the bloodstream. As I told you, when there is no exchange of gases taking place, what is the blood going to carry to all the parts of the body? Very less amount of oxygen that is obtained from those those alveoli that are not damaged. Okay, so what efficiently it is supposed to do, that is lost to a larger extent. What are the other consequences? People with emphysema may develop collapsed lung, also called as pneumothorax. Remember this term. Pneumothorax is the collapsed lung. Uncommon but serious if it occurs. Okay, collapse in the entire lung, almost more than 50% of lungs, the rupturing takes place, and there is no surface area available for respiration, for exchange of gases, and ultimately that results in the collapse of the lungs. Heart problems due to increase in the pressure in the arteries that connect the heart and lungs. Okay, large holes in the lungs, they are called as giant bullae. So the large holes in the lungs, which can be as large as half the lung, as I just mentioned. So these holes, once there is hole in the lung is like a sponge. Okay, it has to be maintained intact. because internally the blood vessels, the air sacs, all of this, it is a very intricate arrangement. When there is a hole in this, there is going to be major disruption of the process. There can be internal bleeding also, because there are chances that the blood vessels also rupture. Okay, definitely the gaseous exchange is not happening. So ultimately this is what happens, right? Going ahead, this is another disorder, sinusitis, wherein sinuses are nothing but these are openings inside the inside and around the structures of the eye, the nose, the forehead, and the cheeks. Okay. Excuse me. Yeah, we were speaking about sinusitis. What this disorder is not exactly included in your syllabus, but I would like to mention and tell you that it is related to the respiratory disorder. What happens here is the sinuses of these are the spaces, as I mentioned, in the in and around the facial area. Okay, that gets filled with mucus. Okay, when that happens, you feel heavying of your cheeks, your headache starts, and the unwanted mucus accumulation leads to a disorder called as the sinusitis. All right, moving ahead. Yeah, in this one single slide, all the different types of respiratory disorders have been cumulatively represented here. So we can have a look. Bronchitis. Let us start from bronchitis. So what happens in bronchitis is there is accumulation of mucus in the bronchus or the bronchioles. So when, just remember, any material, any state of matter which is other than gaseous, that cannot be sustained, that cannot be tolerated in the respiratory system, starting from trachea till the alveoli. I have already mentioned this point in digestion chapter. Okay, when food particle or a drop of water enters the trachea, the way reflex action is shown. Okay, so here again, mucus, of course, mucus lining is there, but what happens ultimately is that mucus accumulation is not allowed, that is not sustained. Alright, so this mucus accumulation happens in bronchitis. This makes the passage of air difficult. Okay, and hence the breathing is a difficult process to take place. Coming to asthma, what happens in asthma is that there is hardening of the alveolus, or accumulation, over accumulation, hardening of the bronchioles, which again transport of air is becomes difficult. All right, so that's why there is flexibility, the elasticity of the alveolus, the bronchioles is lost, and hence there is less amount of air that can be taken in. That's why there is difficulty of breathing that is experienced by the patient. Emphysema, we have already seen. Emphysema is a process where the alveoli gets damaged, wherein they just burst open, they completely lose their activity. Alright, so this is what happens in emphysema. Coming to pulmonary tuberculosis. Okay, tuberculosis is a disorder which is not a major problem now in developing countries like India, but few years ago, around 5 to 6 decades ago, tuberculosis was a major concern. Like we are facing corona these days. Okay, TB was one such concern. Okay, for which BCG injection, vaccination is given to every child the moment it is born, right? So it's Bacillus calmette urine, BCG vaccination that is given, that is to protect the individual from tuberculosis. Okay, so what is it that tuberculosis does? Okay, to there is hole or there is damage of the alveoli again, that is caused, and ultimately reducing the surface area for absorption. Pulmonary fibrosis, this is hardening, okay, gathering of fibers along asbestos bodies. Like asbestos bodies, generally this is suffered by people who are undergoing occupational lung disorder. It is also called as occupational lung disorder. Okay, wherein, or occupational respiratory disorder also. What happens here is when a person is working in areas like mines and industries that produce a lot of smoke, Okay, such people, when they're exposed, that is their occupation, they do not have another option. But as a result, as a side effect of the occupation, what happens is their body, the lungs accumulate asbestos. All right, asbestos is a product that is given out, it's a part of particulate matter which is going to affect the lungs. It is going to go and accumulate, form fibrosis, harden the alveoli, and the respiratory surface is again reduced. Finally, the pneumonia. Pneumonia is again gathering of water and mucus in the lungs. This particular disorder is caused by bacteria Streptococcus pneumoniae. Okay, Streptococcus pneumoniae causes pneumonia, and this is that accumulates more and more water in the lungs, ultimately leading to death if not treated well on time. All right, yeah. So by saying so, we have completed this chapter which deals with breathing and exchange of gases. Just a quick recap. I would just like you people to go through this content. Okay, pulmonary air volumes. Just read this once because this is a very important part. Let's go. Quick recap of what is inspiratory capacity. Okay. You people can just recall pranayama. Okay, the amount of air that you take in, you hold it within you, you expel it out. All of these things, that practical activity of pranayama will give you an idea of what exactly are all these pulmonary volumes and capacities. Just go through this one as well. Okay, next one. Yeah. Just have a look here. Okay, this graph represents what is IRV. This region, the pink waves, what you see, that represents the tidal volume, normal 500 ml of air that we keep respiring. There is more space for air. Okay, this includes inspiratory capacity, which is IRV. It includes inspiratory reserve volume plus tidal volume is the inspiratory. This is the total inspiration capacity. It includes the normal and the additional. Okay, next, how much air that can be respired out. Okay, expiratory reserve volume, okay, is a combination of residual volume and that gives you the functional residual capacity. All right, vital capacity is the total amount of air other than what is left back in the alveoli. That is a vital capacity, which is maximum intake, maximum whatever you can give out. Okay, yeah, total lung capacity is this entire thing, which includes volume, normal breathing, additional inspiration, okay, additional expiration, and the functional residual capacity or volume, right? Yeah. Chloride shift. This happens because the acidity of the blood should not be altered. Normal range is 7.35 to 7.45 should be the normal pH of the blood. If that gets shifted, if that becomes, more or less, then there is chlorine which is outside in the plasma that enters inside the RBC to maintain the pH. Okay, so that the H plus ions do not increase in their concentration. If they increase, then the pH is going to reduce. Okay, and if only HCO3 is going to increase, then that is going to lead to alkylosis, acidosis, alkylosis. Okay, the shift of the curves in case of Bohr's shift, there is a right movement of the shift is towards the right in case of Bohr's shift, which explains chemoreceptors. Alright, so the chemical, the pH is going to act as a chemoreceptor in telling the brain that there has to be respiration, increase in the rate of respiration or decrease in the rate of respiration. Okay, then we have the medulla oblongata, which is a major site of respiratory control. Okay, yeah, what happens if we are at higher altitudes? There is less oxygen in the environment, hence less partial pressure. Okay, so saturation of hemoglobin is less and less amount of oxygen is transported throughout the body. Okay, that's the reason we feel uneasiness when we go to hilly areas. Yeah, this is about the pH that I just explained. Oxygen dissociation curve in myoglobin. Myoglobin has place for only one oxygen, hence the saturation takes place really quick, and therefore the curve, the type of curve, such questions can be asked. What is the type of curve when it is when the oxygen dissociation curve with respect to myoglobin? It should be logarithmic curve. Okay, and it is sigmoid curve when it is with respect to hemoglobin. Okay, for hemoglobin it is a sigmoid S-shaped curve. For myoglobin it is a logarithmic curve. Okay, keep this in mind. In case of fetal hemoglobin, it is more efficient. The hemoglobin of fetus is more efficient in binding to oxygen than the adult hemoglobin. Okay, so here the shift of the curve is towards the left. Slight shift though, but it is towards the left. Yeah, there are 4 oxygen molecules that bind to the hemoglobin molecule. How is oxygen transported? In 3 forms. One is in dissolved form in the plasma, dissolved in the plasma. The second is in the form of, is associated with the hemoglobin, so that becomes Hb, carbaminohemoglobin. Okay, next it is going to be in the RBC. These two are within the RBC. Okay, so in bicarbonate form or hydrogen carbonate. Okay, yeah, so in these 3 forms, carbon dioxide is going to be collected from the tissues of the body and move towards the lungs. When it comes to the lungs, okay, this image will give you a better idea. Yeah, when this comes to the lungs or close to the alveoli, it dissociates. Exact reverse process takes place. Okay, the one associated with hemoglobin detaches, where hemoglobin becomes separate and carbon dioxide is sent to the alveoli. Here carbonic anhydrase is going to reverse the reaction to form water, and again CO2 is sent into the blood, into the alveoli, and the one associated with the dissolved form, it is directly sent across the surfaces. Okay, yeah, so you can just have a look at this chart as well. Okay, yeah, so this is explaining about alveolar exchange of gases. Mechanism of breathing. As told, we need to focus on things. One is what is happening to the lungs. Second, what is happening to the diaphragm. And okay, the third point, what is happening to the thoracic cavity. Okay, so the lungs expand when air is taken in because air fills into each and every alveolus. Diaphragm is going to move down, okay, when there is inspiration. Diaphragm is going to move back to its normal position when there is expiration. Okay, the thoracic cavity is going to move upwards during inspiration and move downwards during expiration. During inspiration upwards, during expiration downwards. Lungs are going to expand during inspiration and contract during expiration. Okay. Yeah. Respiratory system. Alright. Yeah, so students, we shall just stop this chapter here. The synopsis with respect to breathing and exchange of gases is all that is explained to you till now. Okay, so we have seen different types of modes of respiration, that includes aerobic and anaerobic, and internal and external. Okay, respiratory structures in animals are through skin or cutaneous respiration. We have buccopharyngeal respiration, we have tracheal respiration, we have gill respiration, we have pulmonary respiration. Human respiratory system starts with the nostrils, then the nasal cavity, then we have the nasopharynx, okay, then we have the trachea, then we have the bronchus, then we have the bronchioles, then we have the alveoli. Mechanism of breathing, inspiration and expiration. Exchange of gases, we just discussed. Transport of gases, how oxygen and CO2 travel in the bloodstream. Okay, oxygen dissociation curve, this is with respect to the partial pressure of oxygen and saturation of hemoglobin. Okay, pulmonary air volumes, we saw about what is total vital capacity, total lung capacity, functional residual volume, inspiratory residual volume, inspiratory capacity, expiratory capacity, expiratory residual volume, okay, and residual volume, ultimately total entire lung capacity. Okay. Respiratory disorders, asthma, emphysema, pneumonia, sinusitis, then bronchitis, okay, and so occupational lung disorder. All right, so this was the overview of breathing and exchange of gases. We shall now go ahead in the next session with respect to the questionnaire we shall be solving. All of them have been extracted from different sources of NEET itself. Okay, so let's see. So we shall stop for now. See you in the next session. Thank you.